Sorry, but these special operations aren't in our system. Maybe you're confused in your old age, the office manager sneered at the weathered veteran in the worn Navy cap. Master Chief Harmon simply nodded, collected his denied pension paperwork, and walked silently into the pouring rain. Minutes later, the office door crashed open as a three-star general in full dress uniform stormed in, water dripping from his medals. Which one of you just denied benefits to the man who saved my entire battalion in '82? The general demanded, his voice cutting through the sudden silence. No one moved. Michael Harmon adjusted his worn Navy cap as he entered the VA benefits office, the weight of 4 decades of military service evident in the careful way he moved. At 72, his weathered hands still remained steady, the hands that had once disarmed explosives in Vietnam and later guided rescue helicopters through impossible terrain. His khaki pants and button-up shirt had seen better days, but they were pressed and clean, just as they had been every day since he first put on a uniform at 18. Rain dripped from his shoulders as he approached the counter, service records tucked carefully inside a manila folder that showed signs of frequent handling. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the linoleum floor where a dozen other veterans waited their turn. Michael had come early, hoping to avoid the crowds, but the office was already busy with the shuffle of paperwork and quiet conversations. "I'm here about my pension application," he said quietly, standing with the perfect posture that never left him after 20 years in the Navy followed by another 20 in the Army Reserve. "It was denied last month." The young clerk barely looked up from her computer, her fingers tapping impatiently as she finished an email. Her nameplate read Jessica, though she hadn't bothered to introduce herself. "Name?" she finally asked, eyes still fixed on her screen. "Michael Harmon, Master Chief Petty Officer, retired." She typed lazily, sighing as she scrolled through whatever appeared on her monitor. "Says here you don't qualify for the enhanced benefit tier. Your paperwork's incomplete." Her tone suggested this was a routine occurrence, nothing to be concerned about. "That can't be right," Michael replied, pulling out his discharge papers with hands that had once rescued 14 men from a sinking submarine. "I served in Vietnam, Desert Storm, and as an advisor in Afghanistan. 40 years total. My wife needs specialized care now, and this pension adjustment would help cover the costs." The office manager, Mr. Phillips, overheard and approached with an irritated expression. Middle-aged with thinning hair and a tie pulled too tight, he carried himself with the artificial authority of someone who enjoyed the small power his position provided. "Sir, we process hundreds of these claims every week," Phillips said, not bothering to look at the papers Michael had carefully arranged. "If the system says you're denied, there's nothing we can do today. You'll need to submit an appeal." Michael stood straighter, his weathered face impassive. "Some of my service records are classified. There should be a note to contact Naval Intelligence for verification." He pointed to a specific line on his paperwork where an annotation had been made years earlier. Phillips smirked, exchanging glances with Jessica as though they shared a private joke. "Right. Classified. We hear that one a lot." He pushed the papers back toward Michael with barely concealed contempt. "Everyone thinks their service was special, Mr. Harmon. Without proper documentation, we can't help you." A few other veterans in the waiting area watched uncomfortably. An elderly man with a Korean War cap shook his head slowly. A woman in her 30s, waiting with her elderly father, frowned at the exchange. Nobody spoke up. "I flew 14 rescue missions into North Vietnam," Michael said softly, his voice steady despite the dismissal. "I have 2 purple hearts and scars that still ache when it rains. Like today." "Not according to our records," Phillips replied dismissively, already starting to turn away. "If you'd like to file an appeal, the wait time is currently 16 months. Next." Michael didn't move, his weathered hands gripping the counter's edge. The knuckles were scarred from decades of service, rope burns from rescue operations, shrapnel marks from moments he rarely discussed. "My wife is in assisted living. She has early-onset dementia. We need this pension adjustment to keep her there." "Sir, you're holding up the line," Phillips said, voice rising as he gestured to the growing queue behind Michael. "Either file an appeal or step aside. Those are your options today." Rain drummed harder against the windows as Michael carefully gathered his papers. The fluorescent lights highlighted a small scar above his right eye, a souvenir from a night operation in waters he still couldn't discuss. He tucked the folder under his arm with military precision and moved aside, his face betraying nothing of the disappointment that weighed on him. A younger man in line whispered to his companion, just another old-timer living in the past, loud enough for Michael to hear. Michael pretended not to notice. He'd faced enemy fire and flood waters, He could face this indignity without complaint. Still, something in his chest tightened as he stepped away from the counter where Jessica was already calling the next number, her voice slightly louder than necessary. An older woman waiting her turn watched the scene unfold with increasing discomfort. She had brought her own father's paperwork, hoping for better treatment than she was witnessing. When her eyes met Michael's, she offered a sympathetic smile that he acknowledged with the slightest nod. As he turned toward the door, Michael noticed a younger veteran in a wheelchair watching him intently. The man couldn't have been more than 30, his legs covered with a blanket despite the warm building. Something in his expression suggested recognition, though Michael couldn't place him among the thousands of servicemen he'd encountered over the decades. Their eyes met, and Michael gave a slight nod before walking out into the pouring rain, his reflection in the glass door showing shoulders still square despite the weight they carried. His car sat at the far end of the parking lot. He always parked away from the building, a habit formed during years when being a visible target could mean death. Inside, the young man in the wheelchair stared after him, a look of disbelief slowly transforming his features as memory aligned with recognition. Behind the counter, Jessica and Mr. Phillips had already forgotten the old veteran. Their attention turned to the next problem, the next form, the next denial. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away footprints almost as quickly as they were made. Marine Captain James Wilson couldn't shake what he just witnessed. He wheeled himself closer to the woman who had been watching the exchange, his prosthetic legs hidden beneath a blanket despite the office's warmth. "That was Michael Harmon," he whispered, voice urgent and tinged with disbelief. "The Michael Harmon. Who?" she asked, still frowning at how the older veteran had been treated. Her name was Amanda Terrell, and she'd come with her father, a retired Navy man now struggling with dementia. "He pulled my unit out of a firefight in Helmand Province," Wilson explained, his eyes still fixed on the door where Michael had disappeared into the rain. "When our helicopter was shot down, he came back in under heavy fire. For trips in an unarmored vehicle. The man's a legend in special operations. They called him the Ghost, because he appeared when no one else would come." Amanda's eyebrows rose. "And they just sent him away like that?" "Worse than that," Wilson replied, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the wheels of his chair. "They humiliated him. Do you know what it takes for a man like that to come here and ask for help? The things he must have seen and done." Across the room, Mr. Phillips was already dealing with another client, his dismissive tone carrying through the office as he explained yet another denial. Jessica continued typing, unbothered by what had transpired, occasionally glancing at her phone when she thought no one was watching. Wilson pulled out his phone and wheeled himself toward the exit, nodding to Amanda as he passed. "Excuse me. I need to make a call." Outside, he let the rain soak his shoulders as he dialed a number he rarely used. The connection took several rings before a gruff voice answered. "Sir, it's Wilson. James Wilson from the 2nd Marines. I'm at the VA office in Springfield." He paused, listening to the response. "Yes, sir. I know it's been a while, but you told me to call if I ever needed anything. This isn't for me. It's about Michael Harmon." Another pause. "Yes, that Michael Harmon. The same one from Kandahar. And Mosul before that." They denied his pension claim and practically laughed him out of the building. Wilson listened intently, his expression changing from concern to something like satisfaction. "Yes, sir. I'll stay right here." "Thank you, sir." Inside, Jessica noticed several people in the waiting area murmuring and giving her disapproving looks. An older woman shook her head and said something to her husband. The atmosphere had shifted, becoming charged with unspoken judgment. Mr. Phillips felt it too, though he couldn't pinpoint the cause. He straightened his tie and spoke more loudly than necessary to the current applicant, as if volume could restore his authority. Michael was halfway across the parking lot when a car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, revealing Amanda, who had followed him out. "Mr. Harmon? I'm Amanda Terrell. My father served in the Navy too. Can I give you a ride somewhere? This rain is awful." Michael hesitated, then looked at the darkening sky and the long walk to his car. His knee, damaged during a parachute jump gone wrong in '82, had been bothering him more than usual in this weather. "Thank you, ma'am. That's kind of you." In the car, Michael sat quietly as rain pounded the roof. Water dripped from his cap onto his worn jacket, but he didn't seem to notice. Amanda glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "The way they treated you in there wasn't right," she said, turning on the defroster as the windows began to fog. "My father's getting the runaround too. He has dementia now, so I'm handling his paperwork." "It happens," Michael replied, his voice steady but tired. "Not everyone understands what we did back then. Some of it we couldn't talk about, Even if we wanted to. Were you really on classified missions? She asked, immediately regretting the question. I'm sorry. I shouldn't pry. Michael's reflection in the side mirror showed the ghost of a smile. Let's just say there are reasons some of my service records aren't in their computer system. The Navy likes its secrets. My father has dementia now, Amanda said, changing the subject. But he still remembers his service days clearly. The USS Forrestal. He was there during the fire in '67. Michael's attention sharpened. I know men who served on her. Good men. He taught me that respect is earned through actions, not words, Amanda continued, pulling into the parking lot of a small diner. I thought you might want some coffee before heading home. My treat. Back at the VA office, Wilson finished his call and wheeled himself back inside, his expression transformed. The rain had soaked through his jacket, but he didn't seem to notice as he approached the counter, cutting in front of another person. Excuse me, I need to speak with your supervisor, he said firmly to Jessica, who was in the middle of filing her nails. And I suggest you call Mr. Phillips back out here right now. Sir, you'll need to wait your turn, she replied without looking up. Everyone has problems. Everyone thinks their case is special. Wilson leaned forward, his voice dropping to ensure only she could hear him. I just got off the phone with Marine Corps General James Mattingly. He'll be here in 20 minutes, and trust me, you're going to want to be prepared. Jessica's eyes widened as she finally looked at him directly. General who? 3 stars. Former head of Special Operations Command. And a very old friend of Michael Harmon, the man your boss just showed the door. Wilson's smile held no warmth. I'd start pulling Mr. Harmon's file now if I were you. Jessica reached for her phone, her hands suddenly unsteady. Mr. Phillips emerged from his office, looking annoyed at the interruption to his coffee break. What's the commotion out here? He demanded, straightening his tie as whispers spread through the waiting room. The front door swung open, letting in a gust of rain-soaked wind and silencing the entire office in an instant. The door hit the wall with a crack that silenced the entire room. Standing in the doorway was a tall figure in a crisp Marine Corps dress uniform adorned with rows of ribbons that told stories of decades of service. 3 stars glinted on each shoulder as General James Mattingly stepped inside, raindrops still beating on his cover. Despite being well into his 60s, he carried himself with the ramrod straightness of a man half his age. Behind him stood 2 more officers in full dress uniform, a Navy commander and a Marine major, their expressions grim and purposeful. And behind them, looking slightly bewildered, stood Michael Harmon, his worn Navy cap clutched in his hands. The fluorescent lights reflected off the general's polished shoes as he stepped forward, leaving wet footprints on the linoleum. His presence seemed to fill the room, commanding attention without a word being spoken. Who's in charge here? The general's voice carried the natural authority of someone used to commanding thousands. It wasn't particularly loud, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Mr. Phillips stepped forward nervously, suddenly aware of the coffee stain on his tie. I'm the office manager, sir. How can I help you? You can start by explaining why one of the finest servicemen I've ever known was just denied his rightful benefits and treated like an inconvenience. The general's voice remained measured but carried unmistakable steel. Master Chief Harmon and I have known each other for 30 years. He saved my life twice and the lives of my men more times than I can count. The clerk shrank in her chair as Phillips stammered. We were just following protocol, sir. His file doesn't show the level of service that would qualify for the enhanced pension tier. There were gaps in his record and his file. General Mattingly interrupted, his eyebrows rising. Master Chief Harmon served in operations so classified that half his record is still redacted. Did you even make the calls to verify his service as noted in his file? Did you contact Naval Intelligence as the annotation clearly states you should? The silence answered his question. The general turned to one of the officers behind him. Commander Davis, would you please explain to these people exactly who we're talking about? The Navy commander stepped forward, opening a leather portfolio. Master Chief Petty Officer Michael Harmon served with distinction in 3 major conflicts over 4 decades. His service includes 14 confirmed rescue missions behind enemy lines in Vietnam, specialized operations during Desert Storm, and advisory roles in both Iraq and Afghanistan well past standard retirement age. The commander paused, looking directly at Phillips. He has been awarded 2 Navy Crosses, 3 Purple Hearts, and the Distinguished Service Cross, among numerous other commendations. Most of his missions between 1975 and 1989 remain classified at the highest levels, but his service record is, without exaggeration, one of the most distinguished in modern naval history. Murmurs spread through the waiting room as veterans and family members exchanged glances. An elderly man wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap slowly stood up, his eyes fixed on Michael. "Captain Wilson," the general continued, "would you like to tell everyone why you recognized Master Chief Harmon?" Wilson straightened in his wheelchair. 3 years ago in Afghanistan, our helicopter went down in Taliban territory. We had 5 critically wounded Marines and were surrounded. Everyone said extraction was impossible, the terrain was too rough for vehicles, and the air too hot for another helicopter. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Master Chief Harmon was supposedly retired, working as an advisor, but he came back to lead the rescue operation himself. He drove an unarmored Humvee through 30 miles of hostile territory, under constant enemy fire. When the vehicle couldn't go any further, he carried me over his shoulder for 2 miles after my legs were shattered by an IED. 13 of us came home because of him. I was told later that he was 69 years old at the time. The room had gone completely silent. A woman in the back wiped tears from her eyes. The general turned to Michael. "Would you mind, old friend?" Michael hesitantly unbuttoned his shirt to reveal a simple white t-shirt beneath. The general carefully pinned something to it, a navy cross that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Michael Harmon has earned decorations that most military personnel only read about," the general said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the hushed room. When most men his age were enjoying retirement, he volunteered as a trainer and advisor, saving countless lives with his knowledge. There are men and women alive today who owe their existence to his courage and skill. The office had gone completely silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. "Some of his missions remain classified to this day," the general continued. "But I'm authorized to tell you that on 5 separate occasions, Master Chief Harmon volunteered for operations so dangerous they were considered suicide missions. He completed all of them successfully." An elderly man in the waiting area suddenly stood at attention and saluted. Then another veteran stood. Soon, every former service member in the room was on their feet, including those with canes and walkers. Amanda's father, confused about much these days, stood perfectly straight and offered a textbook salute. Mr. Phillips had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the office's cool air conditioning. "Sir, I had no idea." "That's the problem," the general cut in. "You didn't bother to find out. You saw an old man in worn clothes and decided his story wasn't worth your time. You forgot that some of the most extraordinary acts of courage in our nation's history were performed by ordinary-looking people who never sought recognition." Jessica was openly crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. A photo on her desk caught the general's eye, a young man in an army uniform. "Your son?" he asked more gently. She nodded, unable to speak. "Then honor his service by remembering that every veteran who walks through that door has a story. Some, like Master Chief Harmon, carry stories that would keep you awake at night if you knew even half of what they've done for this country." The general turned to Mr. Phillips. "I want his pension application approved today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. And I want a complete review of every denial this office has issued in the past year. If there's a pattern of disrespect like what I witnessed today, I'll personally ensure that it reaches the secretary's desk." Phillips nodded rapidly, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Amanda Terrell stepped forward with her father, who, though confused by much these days, seemed to recognize the significance of the moment. The old sailor straightened and offered a perfect salute to Michael. "Chief," Amanda's father said clearly, using the term of respect reserved for those of Michael's rank, "it's an honor." USS Forrestal, 67. Michael's eyes widened slightly in recognition. He returned the salute with precision, his weathered face softening. "The honor is mine. You were there during the fire." "Damage control team," the older man replied, momentary clarity breaking through his usual confusion. "We lost good men that day." Michael nodded solemnly. "That we did." The general placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "The question isn't whether he deserves his full pension. The question is what else we owe him that can never be repaid." The room remained standing in silence as Phillips retreated to his office, already reaching for the phone. Jessica wiped her eyes, looking at Michael with new understanding as she pulled his file back up on her computer. Everyone waited, wondering what would happen next, as the rain outside finally began to ease. By the following week, the Springfield, Virginia office had undergone remarkable changes. The sterile walls now featured photographs of local veterans alongside their service information. The reception area had been rearranged to feel more welcoming, with a dedicated liaison officer for complex cases sitting at what had once been Mr. Phillips' desk. Phillips himself had been reassigned to the regional office for additional training. Before leaving, he had personally delivered Michael's approved pension documents to his home, along with a handwritten letter of apology. The delivery had been awkward but necessary for Phillips most of all. "My father served in Vietnam," Phillips had admitted as he stood in Michael's modest living room, unable to meet the older man's eyes. "He never talked about it, and I never asked. I think somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the person behind the paperwork. I became the very thing my father complained about when he was alive." Michael had accepted the apology with a simple nod. "We all have jobs to do. Sometimes we forget why we're doing them." Those words had kept Phillips awake for several nights afterward. The story of what happened spread quickly through veteran communities. Captain Wilson shared it at a VFW meeting, and by the end of the month, similar incidents were being reported at VA offices across the state, veterans standing up for each other, demanding the respect they had earned. By month's end, the regional VA director had implemented a new training program for all staff, featuring Michael's case as a central example. Jessica, the young clerk who had been so dismissive, requested to be part of the new Veterans Recognition Initiative. She brought her son, now home from his deployment, to meet Michael, watching as the young soldier listened wide-eyed to sanitized versions of rescue missions that had become local legends. "I never understood what Dad was going through over there," she told Michael quietly as her son examined the Navy Cross with reverence. "I think I understand a little better now." On a crisp autumn morning 3 months later, Michael visited his wife at the assisted living facility, now secure in the knowledge that they could afford her care. The adjusted pension had made it possible to move her to a memory care unit with specialized programs for veteran spouses. As he walked through the doors in his pressed blue shirt, the one he saved for special occasions, he noticed something different. The staff stood a little straighter as he passed. A new display in the lobby featured photographs of resident veterans and their family members who had served. His wife's nurse mentioned that several employees had taken a new training course on addressing the specific needs of veterans and their families. "Your wife had a good morning, Mr. Harmon," the nurse told him with genuine warmth. "She remembered your wedding day today. Asked when you'd be coming to take her dancing." Michael's eyes misted slightly. "I'll take her for a spin around the garden if she's up to it." Amanda Terrell had helped establish a regular coffee meeting for veterans and their families at the facility. Her father, though still struggling with dementia, found clarity during these gatherings, especially when Michael was there. Something about the presence of a fellow sailor seemed to anchor him to the present. The stories connect them, Amanda explained to a new family member joining the group. Even when they can't remember what they had for breakfast, they remember what happened on those ships or in those jungles. It's like their service is written in a different part of the brain. Michael had become something of a reluctant celebrity among the residents and staff. He deflected attention whenever possible, preferring to listen to others' stories rather than share his own. But occasionally, when asked directly by another veteran, he would share carefully edited versions of missions that could now be discussed. The uniform changes, Michael told a group of teenagers volunteering at the facility, but the commitment doesn't. Every person who serves writes a blank check to their country. Some get cashed for more than others, but the courage it takes to write that check in the first place, that's what matters. The Springfield, Virginia office became a model for others in the region. A new manager had been appointed, a retired Army sergeant who had served in Iraq and understood both the military and bureaucratic worlds. The waiting room that had once been filled with frustration now hosted weekly information sessions and peer support groups. General Mattingly visited occasionally, without fanfare, sitting with veterans from different eras and listening to their experiences. He always made time to check on Michael and his wife, bringing small gifts that showed he remembered their conversations, a book of poetry Michael had mentioned enjoying, a soft shawl in his wife's favorite color. 6 months after that rainy day, Michael received a call about speaking at the VA's National Training Conference. He declined politely. "I didn't serve to be recognized," he told Amanda over coffee while visiting her father. "I served because it needed doing." But when the local elementary school asked him to attend their Veterans Day ceremony, he agreed after some persuasion from Amanda. He wore his Navy cap, now accompanied by a single pin, his Navy Cross. As children approached to shake his hand, he met each one at eye level, his hands still steady after all these years. "Were you scared?" one small boy asked, as wide as he looked up at Michael. Michael considered the question carefully. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," he finally answered. "It means you do what needs doing anyway." The rain had returned that day, drumming on the gymnasium roof just as it had on the VA office windows months before. But this time, as Michael looked out at the faces watching him with newfound understanding, the sound felt different. less like an ending and more like the rhythm of something important continuing, passing from one generation to the next. Jessica sat in the audience with her son, now preparing for his second deployment. She caught Michael's eye and nodded respectfully. The lesson had been learned, the circle completed. In the back of the room, Mr. Phillips stood quietly, having driven over 2 hours to attend. He wouldn't approach Michael. Some lessons came with necessary distance, but he needed to see this. His new position involved training intake specialists across the region, and every session began with the story of the day he failed to see the hero standing in front of him. Michael Harmon had never sought recognition for his service. But in finally receiving it, he had secured it for countless others who would walk through those doors long after his own battles were done. As he stood to applause he didn't want but accepted with grace, he thought of all the men and women still waiting for their country to see them, really see them, and silently dedicated this moment to them.